What's up, everybody? Chris Treese back with Chris Olson, another episode of the Delta Collective. And today we're talking about subcontractors, specifically why subcontractors can be an easier form of labor than in house employees, what the pros and cons are, and how we go about making sure that another company follows our culture on our job sites. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited about this topic because I know it's something that you put a lot of work and time into. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Where should we start?
So I guess my biggest question, and I'm sure what a lot of people on this video when they click are going to be asking is, what's your opinion on subcontractor model for versus employees? So if you're a remodeling company, a deck company, or anything in construction, how do you decide whether a subcontractor model is right for you versus just hiring more in-house employees?
Sure. So I'm going to get a little bit abstract first because I think it's pretty clear, in my opinion, if you're looking to scale as fast as possible, that a subcontractor is a cleaner, simpler model. It will obviously have its headaches, but especially from the standpoint of a company that has no historical data on labor rates, having in-house people can be a little more challenging to estimate. And so I think from that standpoint alone, subs are a more profitable model there. Now, I will say when we back up, if we're not just looking at profitability, it really comes down to who you are as a person, I think, and what you want your company to look like. You know, I've got some friends and I've got a client who they really want in-house labor.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be able to control every detail. They want to be able to build the culture. They're really excited to provide for families and opportunities for these employees that they have to grow and find a home at work. And that's
Yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah, and I think that's a common thing. I think there are a lot of people that really want to control every detail of what their company looks like, their image, their brand, their culture. So I was going to ask you this question a little bit later, but maybe let's do that first, actually. So, what if you decide to go with a subcontractor model? Uh, how does that look from a perspective of company culture and brand?
Yeah, so with subcontractors specifically, it starts with a subcontractor agreement. So in our subcontractor agreement, it lays out everything that we legally can handle. Now, I will preface this with make sure you look at your state's laws because they're all different on what you can and can't get away with. Like I can't make people wear Olympus outdoor clothing, but I can give it to them for free, and if they choose to wear it, cool.
Yep.
So you can't do that, but what you can do is control the controllables. So you can make sure that they have a cleanliness clause. You know, you can't stink on my job sites. You have to look professional. A timeliness clause. You can't tell them what time to start work or when to finish outside of like if there's an HOA requirement or a city ordinance or something like that that they have to follow without permission. But you can say, hey, if you take this contract, you have to be done by X. There is a deadline. Here's liquidated damages. Here's the consequences if that's not done,
Yeah,
etc.
and it's so variable, just like Trace said, by state law. Great example in Washington State. I can't tell a subcontractor, "Hey, you've got to be on this job site by 9 a.m." But ironically, I can hold them accountable to the time they commit to. So if I say, "Hey, tell me the day and the time you're going to be there," and he says, "I'm going to be there on January 10th at 9 a.m." and he doesn't show up till noon, and the job doesn't get done because they started late, I can hold them accountable or penalize them or reschedule them, whatever I need to do to hold them accountable to when they said they were going to start. So it's definitely one of those situations of make sure you know your state laws and state requirements, because subcontractors, you can't manage a subcontractor like an employee. You have to manage them correctly.
Yeah, 100%. Um, and so I would just be very cautious of what you do or don't tell them. But in our sub agreement, it also it lays out payment plans. It lays out the cleanliness of the job site. We expect them to clean up where trash should be handled, if they're hauling it away, or if we'll have a dumpster, or what that looks like. So we control as much as we can control. And then we have consequences in there for if they don't follow. So if you leave a messy job site, or like my pet
Mhm.
peeve, if you leave cigarette butts on my job
Mhm.
site, especially because all my sites are no smoking, go to the street. I don't want that on my site. I don't want my homeowners having to deal with it. Homeowners don't want to deal with it or smell it. So,
Yep.
but if I have to pick up cigarette butts, I'm not calling you back to do it. I'm doing it. So it's fixed immediately, and you're getting
Mhm.
billed for my time.
Yep. Yeah, and we've obviously talked about a bunch of different things, but just to reiterate, I mean, having that subcontractor agreement is so important. I mean, how many times have you talked to a client or a colleague that has subcontractors and doesn't have anything in writing? And how are you supposed to hold somebody accountable or be upset with them when they don't meet your expectations if your expectations aren't clear? It's
Yeah. Honestly, when you start using subcontractors, it's probably the number one thing people run into. It's very
Mhm.
similar to when people do handshake agreements on job sites or for jobs
Yep.
in general, and then they wonder why they don't get paid. Well, you don't have any legal backing
Mhm.
that you should get paid this amount because you just have a verbal agreement.
Yeah, and that's probably a common misconception that there are a lot of states where contract law is very vague. I'll give you another example from Washington. Here in Washington State, a text message saying "I agree to your proposal" is legally binding in Washington State, but a text message from a contractor saying "I'll take the job" is not. Just like an employee saying "I'll start work on Monday" does not constitute an employment agreement. So it's a good reason why understanding your state requirements or talking to a labor attorney or having a business attorney can be a really good idea when you're growing and scaling your business.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is obviously when you have employees, estimating is a little bit more gray because you don't know exactly how long things are going to take and you're paying people by the hour. So when you're building out estimates or proposals or job costing when you're on a subcontractor model, talk to me about how that looks different and how you do it.
How a subcontractor job costing or estimating looks different than in-house employees? Is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
I guess I could have phrased that better. So when you're looking at switching from a employee model to a subcontractor model, or you're new and you're going to hire your first subcontractor, how would you recommend people budget for it or build their estimates differently or job costs differently when they're working with subs versus themselves or employees?
So there's two paths you can go. On simple projects, you just have a pay sheet. So most of the systematized deck builders that I know, for instance, they know that they're going to pay X amount of dollars for framing. They're going to pay X amount of dollars per square foot for laying treated boards, X amount for composite boards, X amount of linear foot per railing. And they just have that out. And that's part of the subcontractor agreement. So it says, hey, you have to dig this many footings, you have to frame this many square feet, da 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 da. The other side of that, if you get into bigger stuff that's more custom, like a lot of what we do, is we'll actually go through a design phase and then we'll send that out to bid. So there's a full plan set, a full scope of work, full selections and finishes for them to look at with what they're going to be working on. And then they have to give us a bid in writing that we can then accept and add to our budget.
Yeah, and I think that's important is when you're estimating an employee job. So you say framing is going to take 3 days and 24 man hours for my crew to handle, or 48 man hours if it's 2 man crew, et cetera, et cetera. That's an estimate on how long you think it's going to take. But if your guys take more or less time, it changes your margin. Whereas if you get a bid from a subcontractor saying it's going to cost $5,000 and you bid the customer 7,500, if the sub takes a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, the cost doesn't change. So that's kind of what you were talking about at the beginning, where it's more predictable and it can be more profitable because you can fix and basically know your margin when the job starts as compared to it being somewhat of a true estimate where you don't know exactly.
Yeah, I actually don't think it's more profitable in the long run on a per job basis because subs tend to be more expensive. They're covering their own insurance. They need to have profit in there, and you want them to have profit in there so that the good
Of
subs
course.
stay around to serve you and partner with you. But I do think that, and then I think once you get your numbers dialed in for in-house people, you can have a higher profit margin because you're taking the profit from them. So there's one less layer of profit in there. So I think long term it's just more work up front to get to the point where you know your production rates, and it just takes time, frankly.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe more profitable is the wrong way to put it. Would you say it's more consistent or more scalable as compared to more
predictable?
Yeah. Okay, well that makes sense. So you mentioned it briefly in there, but I wanted to actually go into that next. So you talked about how it's important for subcontractors to make profit because you want the good contractors to make money, so they stick around. So tell me a little bit about A, how you find good subcontractors, and then B, how you keep the ones that are good and that you want to work with long term.
Sure. So how do you find them? Always networking. Literally anytime. Actually, I do have a story for this one. I met a new roofer Friday at the gym. He was a guy that was sitting right there. He liked the t-shirt I had on. He made a comment about it. I introduced myself. We got to talking. He owns, or his family owns, a really big roofing company outside of Kansas City. They just moved down here 2 weeks ago. And so we started talking about like core values and what's important and how do you best serve people. And a lot of what he said was in alignment with me. So it was quick response time, high communication, show up when you say you're going to. And so that's step one, right? We've met someone. Now we'll go vet him. So I'll go look up his company. He sent me his business card. I'll look at the reviews they have over there, and then we'll give him a shot. He actually just he's just launching his company down here today.
Awesome. That's pretty cool. So, and that always networking mentality is so important, not just for subcontractors, for everything. But I totally agree. Almost all of the best subcontractors or business colleagues or associates I've met over the years have been through networking.
Yeah, I mean, I think, aside from leads, the best people in life are going to be met through networking anyway. I mean, you and I have known each other for almost a decade at this point, and we met networking in another group.
Yep.
And you and I have gone through some of the hardest things in our lives together at the same time. We've had conversations that 10 years ago I would have never thought I would have. I mean, especially because we're almost a decade apart in age. So like I don't hang out with many. Are you 29?
30.
Yeah, so you just turned 30.
Yep.
I'm going to be 38 this year. Like I don't hang out with that many people under 30.
Yeah.
So that just by being in that group and having a conversation about business led us to eventually build that relationship.
Yeah.
And I would say that most of my closest friends now are people I've met online through networking. They're fellow business owners.
Yeah, well, and I wanted to mention that for the people listening. I mean, it's kind of wild that we've known each other for almost 10 years. We were so far apart in age. But the other thing that people probably don't may or may not have made the connection of is we also live halfway across the country from each other. I mean, we've been pretty dang good friends and business colleagues and now business partners, and we've met in person how many times? 4, 5 times in 10 years.
4 or 5 tops.
But we talk every day. It's kind of crazy how those kind of relationships can happen because all it started with was a conversation that led to us realizing our values align.
And that's what a lot of subs are. So always be networking, but if you need to find people, that's why networking in general is really big, because my last project manager, who's moved on because he found an opportunity that's incredible and I couldn't match his pay. But I found him because I made a job posting on Facebook asking if anyone knew someone who was maybe not 100% happy where they were. He wasn't even looking for jobs yet. I mean, he was kind of starting to put feelers out, thinking about it. Ended up being like a 90-day conversation before he finally came on, and he was fantastic. One of the best employees I've ever had.
Yeah, one of the best employees I ever had, who wasn't my project manager, but he was one of my senior crew leads that ended up helping with a lot of project management, was the same thing. I actually made a Facebook post very similar, and it was basically, hey, are you sick and tired of your boss's crap? Do you want to have somebody that actually cares about you? I talked a lot about our values and about how we're growing as a company. And he was actually the owner of his own company and was so burnt out and sick and tired of dealing with being a small company owner that he called me up, and he originally asked me about being a subcontractor. And the more he and I talked, same thing over a period of probably 2 or 3 months, he ended up just deciding to wind up the last 3 or 4 projects he had. And then he started working for me a day or 2 a week, then 3 days a week, then 4 days a week, then full time. And he worked full time for me for years. And he and I are still friends. He's back to working for himself again. And he and I work together when I need him. But he was one of my best employees, worked for me for 4 years full time, probably total. And same thing, it all started with a conversation and an alignment of values and an alignment of goals. And that's so important.
What was the second question?
So once you get those good subcontractors, how do you keep them? How do you make sure they stay happy and that the relationship is mutually beneficial for both of you?
You take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, what does that mean? You don't treat them as just subcontractors or just vendor partners or trade partners. You learn who they are and what's important to them. I've got some subs that are super money motivated. I've got subs that want to feel part of something.
Yep. I've
got some subs that really all they care is that you're 100% clear on scope and schedule and payment, and they just like they're to the point. Mm-hmm. And knowing what that is so that you can serve them best there, that's how you keep them. And then you meet them in the middle on stuff where whether they miss a bid or they make a mistake or something, there's give and take. Like we set all these rules so that you can make exceptions to them. Mm-hmm. We don't have constant exceptions and then try and make a rule. So a great example is we pay, if you have your invoices in by 5 o'clock on Friday, you get paid the following Friday. Mm-hmm. That's how we write checks. Yep. But I've had a guy call me and he's like, dude, I can't pay my guys if you don't pay me this week. Mm-hmm. Now, I immediately took care of him that one time.
But not every week.
So then he asked it again the next week, and I had to say, okay, like I did it a second week. And I told him, I said, I'm not doing it 3 weeks in a row. I called on the third week and I had to say, no, I'm sorry. You need to run your business better. You need to, I don't want it to become the norm that I'm breaking my process for you, but I do want you to see that when it's really necessary, I'm willing to.
Yeah. Well, and I'll give you a similar related, not quite the same example is I have a subcontractor that does roof cleaning and pressure washing for my service company. And he didn't ask me to pay him early. He was very understanding about my rule of I wait until I get paid by clients and you get paid at the end of that week that they pay. So if he sends me an invoice but that client hasn't paid, he doesn't get paid for that job because obviously I'm not going to pay him for a job that the client hasn't paid for within reason. There's a clause where if more than 7 days goes by without a payment, they get paid anyways and I collect them. But he talked to me about it. And originally when he and I started working together, we batched invoices he got paid for all the jobs in a week at the following week. And because there was a number of clients that were paying 3, 4, 5 days after the job, which is pretty normal for small ticket service companies, he was finding that invoices were delayed and it was affecting his cash flow. So he asked me, hey, can we invoice for every job individually instead of batching the whole week together? That way, all the clients that pay, I get paid for as soon as possible. And I said, yeah, that's fine. So I didn't technically change my process. We just changed the way that he invoices me so that he had better cash flow on his side and it didn't affect me at all. And it's a great example of how mutually beneficial changes or adjustments are possible if you're willing to have the conversation, talk to them, and you make sure that you're on the same page. Because at the end of the day, a subcontract relationship has to be mutually beneficial. And that means that you help them out, they help you out, and that it's a sustainable, healthy, mutually beneficial relationship. But you have to also know when to hold the line and when to state what you need as the GC.
Yeah.
So I think we've hit all the topics I want to cover. The biggest thing I would ask is at the end of all this whole conversation, do you feel that you can build a good company culture with a primarily subcontractor model?
100%.
Yeah. And I would agree with you. I think that a lot of guys are nervous about it because they feel like they're going to lose control. And we've talked about all these different things. You've really illustrated how you hold guys accountable while still treating them like subcontractors and treating them well. and how to keep them, how to find them, how to make sure that your agreements are in writing. And I think that a lot of guys are just nervous because they don't want to let go of the control they have over employees. But
Yeah, so let me give you two thoughts on that. One, just because they're a subcontractor doesn't mean you can't control quality and execution.
Mhm.
So you get to say the process in which you want something done and the level at which you want it done at.
Yep.
And you can have something in their work order that states that it has to be done to this specification, and if it's not, payment will be withheld entirely or enough to pay someone else. I had a mason drop a claw, those deals you pick up a claw and you pick up like 10 bricks on each side in a stack. He
Mhm.
dropped it down a set of composite stairs. Cost $3,000 in damage. I did not pay
Whoa.
him because he refused to cover it.
Wow.
So, of course, that was the job that was a TimberTech ASIC line, high-end boards, all picture framed, and like literally the entire bottom set of stairs had to be replaced.
Mhm.
And so he refused to pay for it. I withheld his payment. If he wants to take me to small claims or something like that, I can just show them the contract where it says any damages you're responsible for, and I will withhold payment until that payment is made.
Yep.
So you do get to hold the line. And for me, I think this is very area dependent, but something that I've seen a lot in my area is all of the best craftsmen have gone out on their own.
Mhm.
Even if they just want to be one person with a helper, one person with two helpers.
Yep.
Because they might make around here, you might make $35 an hour on the high end as a carpenter, but they can go charge $100 directly to a client and make substantially more money in their pocket.
Mhm.
And then they don't have to worry about if their boss is going to let them have overtime or not, or
Yeah.
what hours they can or can't work, or if they're going to be waiting because their job isn't to go get materials, but they work so fast that they got ahead of it. I mean,
Yeah.
that last one shouldn't be a thing. You should have your production in line and everything delivered, but stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so it just gives them the freedom to kind of control their destiny a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we talk about in the big picture as business coaches, is that there are a lot of people out there that don't want to be a $3 million a year company. They really just want control over their life. And I mean, it sounds crazy, but I've literally talked to guys that own companies because they just don't want to have to ask their boss when they can take their lunch break. And that doesn't mean that they're unsuccessful because they don't want to run a 5, 10, $20 million a year company. But those guys that are skilled craftsmen that have gone off on their own, but are okay being a smaller business if it means that they have control and consistency and make more, they make great subcontractors, because what if you can provide what they value, which is consistent quality work, consistent good communication, get paid on time, and they align with your values. Just because they're a business owner doesn't automatically mean they're a different level of quality or a different level of expectation. It just means that you have to learn what's important to them, what they value, and fulfill that. Just like when you hire an employee, you have to understand what their goals in life are. Because if you just view an employee as you do 40 hours a week and I pay you X amount of dollars, it might work for a while, but eventually you're going to hit a wall where they don't feel fulfilled in what they're doing anymore. And with subcontractors, I think honestly, those smaller companies that value consistency and control and all those things, but don't have a desire to be big, huge, giant companies, make the best subcontractors.
Yeah, especially in a company where you're looking to be a partner with subs.
Mhm.
I don't want to go do the physical labor anymore.
Mhm.
They don't want to do the business side of it.
Yep.
So let me handle the business side. You get paid what you want to. I'll make what I need to on top of that. I'll handle the marketing. I'll find the clients. I'll handle the permitting. I'll have materials delivered. I'll do all of the logistics and management side, and you just get to go to work.
Yep, exactly. Well, I think we are at the point of wrapping up on this. Treese, do you have any last thoughts? I mean, I like those last few things we talked about. I think that at the end of the day, a lot of the guys that came to this video looking for questions about subcontractors have had them answered. But any final thoughts or any last things before we wrap up?
No, I think I'm good, man.
Okay. Well, for all of you guys listening, if you made it this far, thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to join us in our Facebook community, we have a free Facebook group primarily for contractors and business owners, and we talk about a lot of these topics about winning, about being successful, about growing your company, about scaling. And it's a great place just to network and meet other contractors that are looking to grow and scale their companies as well. This video is also available as a podcast on Apple and Spotify, so if you want to listen while you're working, you can find it there. And otherwise, appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the next one.